Wunderbar, wir sind live. Sorry, now I made a mistake. I was speaking in German. Perfect, we are live now, talking about the AI Act and especially about Article number 4, AI literacy. And I'm very excited to have a very special guest today, Kai Zenner. First of all, welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time, having the time to be here today for kind of like this interview or LinkedIn live session talking about AI literacy and explaining a little bit. And what we want to do is we don't kind of like do large introductions ourselves about the guests, but we want to give them time to introduce themselves. So really take your time, talk a little bit about kind of like your background and your role also in the AI Act. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Tristan, also for the invitation. Always happy to do that because I really feel, let's say, that it's also my duty to talk, to inform, to raise awareness about the AI Act, but also other things that are coming from the European Union, because as we all know, there are a lot of wrong information, maybe even misinformation around, and therefore I think those sessions like today are always helpful for everyone. Indeed, Kai Zenner from the European Parliament, as Tristan was saying, I was one of the, let's say, policy advisors that were heavily involved in, or especially on the technical level, with regards to the AI Act. So we have so-called technical meetings where the law was particularly written and prepared until then the political level, the parliamentarians or the commissioners and so on had, let's say, the fine-tuning. And because the AI Act was so technical, we had many meetings. And as you see a little bit in the end result, there was a problem because, first of all, we were under a lot of time pressure. The especially European Commission with Ursula von der Leyen wanted to close the negotiations before the European election in 2024 in order to present the AI Act as a success story coming from Europe. But in particular for us, for the technical level, this created an extreme time pressure, and unfortunately, in my opinion, led also to an outcome where at least some parts of the AI Act are very much unclear. And our main objective with the AI Act to create legal certainty for users, for developers, but also for third parties, we didn't achieve, at least in all areas. A second big issue in the whole discussions was, of course, that AI is, as we all know, something very broad. So let's say a buzzword that is including a lot of different technologies, and those technologies are also highly dynamic. So many things that we discussed in 2020 were not really up to date anymore in 2022 or in 2023. And this is why there was a lot of time pressure by political actors. There was also kind of time pressure by the technological advance. And third and last point, with which we struggled a lot in our negotiations on the AI Act, was again a political divide. So many people until today were very scared about artificial intelligence, had a lot of concerns, while the other side was really hoping that AI is bringing our continent forward. We are hoping that it has a lot of potential for our industry and so on and so on. But if you have two so different sides, it's of course extremely difficult to find a common ground. Besides AI, because I was talking now already a lot about our journey, let's say, on the AI Act, I became, and with that I can make a very nice link to what I just said, I became more and more, maybe even obsessed about better regulation. I feel that the European Union created a lot of laws in the past that had often very good intentions, like the AI Act, but unfortunately we didn't take enough care, we didn't coordinate it enough, and so on. And this is something that is keeping me at the moment very busy, but also Brussels per se is very, very occupied by an attempt to streamline, to simplify current legislation and make it possible for European companies, but also for consumers and so on, to better understand what the legal situation is. So this was already a lot of content, but around those things, I'm doing a lot of work here in the European Parliament, and until
I mean,
now, it never became boring.
I can imagine. This has been a big legislative piece. I used to run one of the largest startup incubators for artificial intelligence. So we have been very closely looking at the AI Act, kind of like from the beginning, and it's very much what you said. So what I thought was the challenge was not so much that the AI Act is there, but that it's coming quite fast, and there are so many question marks around kind of like, how do I implement it? And I mean, you already mentioned it. There has been a lot of criticism about the AI Act. I would be kind of like, before we dive into the topic of AI literacy, want to talk a little bit more about the AI Act. So what do you think, kind of like, what is the main criticism that you hear? Where is the main criticism justified? And where do you say kind of like this good attentions that we have, where can we find them in the AI Act? And what is kind of the goal? And maybe to share one anecdote before I leave it to you is, so quite often when I'm on the stage or on panel, we also speak about the AI Act, and I also get the criticism. And I ask the people, well, who of you is in favor, or who doesn't like the AI Act? And most of the people raise their hand, or things that is kind of like, it's problematic. And then I ask the people, like, well, who of you has read the AI Act? And then almost no one is raising their hand. So how do you see this?
Yeah, it's a really good point. And actually, politics is also about feelings, about atmosphere. And I think similar to the GDPR, at least when you are in Germany, the AI Act is now in a kind of same category of almost the whole population and kind of a whole group of industry being very negative about this law. Again, as I said, it's sad because the law per se has a rather positive objective, is based on a lot of prep work in Germany from Datenethik Kommission, the German Parliament also. On the European level, we had a lot of professors giving input. On the international level, OECD was working on it, UNESCO, UN, G7, and so on and so on. And the AI Act is not a complete new invention of the European Union, another crazy regulatory idea. Instead, it's really focusing and taking a lot of those ideas from prep work. And again, this prep work is, again, not European, but is really based on international alignment, on kind of international effort of experts to tackle some of the challenges that are being posed by, again, this buzzword of artificial intelligence and all those different technologies that are falling into it. A bit more to your questions about how the AI Act can be assessed. Again, there is really black and white. There are very positive things that we in the AI Act, for example, I would say created now a law that is much more future-proof and also accessible. With that, I mean that compared again to the GDPR, which is kind of closed since it's being adopted and entered into force. The AI Act will be constantly redrafted via technical standards, implementing acts, delegated acts, guidelines, and so on. And in most of those, let's say, instruments, legal instruments, stakeholders will be involved. There's an advisory forum, a scientific panel. Now the code of practice for AI models is being drafted in a very, very large group, a kind of public-private partnership, where I would say regulators have really learned a lesson from the past and try to involve real technical experts in the whole process. Also, the AI Act is much more principle-based. As I underlined already several times, it's based on an international alignment before the act, but also after the act is adopted. There is really this attempt to not create something unique for Europe, but for example, when it comes to risk management, try to build up some mutual approaches. The downside is, however, and you touched it yourself, that the act became so complicated and in many areas so vague that even I, who wrote it, and similar to you, also when I'm saying it always create laughings or loud discussions sometimes even I do not really understand the full AI Act, and I know every sentence, but in many areas, as a lawyer, I cannot say you need to do that, and by doing that, you are being compliant. And if I, as a lawyer and as a person who partially wrote the AI Act, need to say that, what is then about the small startup founder from Berlin Tempelhof or something? He or she will never be able to do it. And also, what is a big problem is that there is really a lack of evidence. Because of the time pressure, because of the political divide, there was no real investigation if those use cases in Article 5, in Annex 3, high-risk use cases or forbidden use cases, are really things that are existing already on the market, will likely come up if those things are maybe already regulated in sectorial legislation, in other existing legislation. Also, certain procedures are completely unclear how it's working. And also, as you said, the AI Act now is coming, also it's coming in parts, but those parts are so quickly after each other that if now, for example, Senelec, the standardization body, is not able to provide the technical standards in time for the AI Act, the whole idea of creating an easy and cheap way to get compliant with the AI Act is gone. And this would mean that basically all companies would need to heavily invest in, again, expensive law firms, maybe even would not dare to invest into AI and so on. So to summarize everything, a lot of good new ideas where the legislator really learned from previous mistakes, but unfortunately, things that should be normal, creating an evidence-based law, using clear legal language, there we made a lot of mistakes or created a lot of unclarity, which is why those positive points, at least right now, are not very present, and everyone is focusing more on the negative points.
Yeah. One great point, and probably this helps also kind of like to narrow a little bit down on what we actually want to talk today, is you said the AI Act is going to take place over several phases, and actually the first phase where companies really have to do something is, I think, the 2nd of February. I think there are two, if I correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you know it much better. There are two parts. The first, I think you have to stop using prohibited systems, and the other part is AI literacy, that you have to make sure that, and I think that's interesting because the idea of AI literacy, it doesn't really matter if you are a deployer or if you are a provider of AI solutions. It says more or less that you have to make sure that your workforce or those people who are in contact with artificial intelligence have the necessary requirements to understand the benefits and the challenges of what AI means. So maybe we can use this to talk a little bit more about AI literacy. So what is behind this? I mean, you wrote this. So what is the idea behind it, and why is it there? And why is it one of the first paragraphs that is coming into action?
A lot of interesting points. Maybe I start first of all with the timetable. So indeed, you are completely right. The prohibitions and AI literacy, but also a few other articles, so definitions, scope, and so on. Article, I think 1 to 5 are becoming applicable now on the 2nd February next year. Then there's another point in August, where the so-called GPI obligations, so foundation model obligations, are kicking in, and the main part of the AI Act becomes applicable in August 26. If you are then looking a little bit to the fines and also to, for example, the old Article 83, I think it's now 111, if I'm not mistaken. It's about the so-called grandfather clause. It shows that you really need to read the AI Act. Back to your point, most people that are complaining do not do it. Also, most companies and the C-level of companies that are currently, let's say it's simple, freaking out about certain rumors that they are hearing, they are not really reading the whole act. Why am I saying it? Because especially with AI literacy, many companies are currently selling certification, how to become compliant with AI literacy obligations, and are kind of indicating that if you are not doing it, you are facing an automatic fine of 7% of your global income or whatsoever. No, if you are checking the fines, Article 4 AI literacy is actually not connected to a fine, and also let's say the national competent authorities that would be the authorities that are enforcing the AI Act, that those will not be fully established before the 2nd August of 2025. And this is important because, yes, it means that Article 4 is applicable already in February, but since there is no enforcement and there are no fines, there is not that urgency to become perfectly ready with AI literacy. Last point on that, you also need to read, and I'm now reading the English version, you really need to read the article. It's saying to their best extent. So some companies that are now saying that you're a deep learning expert until your secretariat needs to be ChatGPT experts and need to fully understand every mechanism of OpenAI's products or whatsoever, are also not really correct, because you need to definitely install and integrate certain mechanism. You need to provide certain trainings, but it's to a best extent, which in law means you need to show efforts. But it's not an absolute article. And now I remember you also asked why this article is there. And maybe before we are really diving into this article, I can also give a little bit of history. It's
Yes.
actually it's actually not something that so I work for MEP Axel Voss from the conservative EPP, so in Germany, CDU, and we supported this article broadly, but it was never something that we were pushing. It was actually pushed by the Social Democrats. They have in general a very strong stance on digital literacy. They want to prepare our population in particular to the new age of digital also threats, disinformation, fake news, and so on. So again, in general, in principle, a very important point. However, because the negotiations, the political negotiations here in Brussels were so chaotic and under so much time pressure, this article was basically shifted across the text in many, many instances. Several times it was completely out. Then it was brought back again. Then it was standing at the very end of the AI Act. Then at the very beginning. Then in the middle. Then it became a high-risk obligation, out, in, and so on and so on. In the end, it landed in at the beginning again in Article 4 or as Article 4. But things like no connection to the fines, things like already applicable now in February, is actually more an accident than a plan of the co-legislator, because I think most people wanted to have it applicable with the rest of the AI Act in summer 26. But again, because of this rush at the very end of the negotiations, now it's there, and now to a certain extent, companies, of course, need to prepare. Maybe I stop here and we dive deeper.
I mean, what I like, I think actually, so actually AI literacy is one of my favorite parts of the AI Act, not because I'm heavily involved in training it, but because it's basically what I'm seeing is the best way to drive adoption in organization is to train them on artificial intelligence, and having it somewhere there and make them obliged to this part really helps to kind of like generate this know-how. And there's normally kind of like when we go into organizations, this is kind of like the starting point where we start with training, making them understand what is AI, because this helps the organizations or the people also have a good understanding. Okay, well, where might there be possibilities for AI? And what I always say is one of the big challenges if we're talking or if we're looking in general about the AI market, we focus a lot on the startup market. So kind of like if we kind of on the value chain, but this is only the supply side of artificial intelligence. And I think the biggest challenge that we have in Europe is actually empowering the demand side. So our economy, the German Mittelstand and so on, to use artificial intelligence, to adapt it. And I have the numbers from Germany. I think there was the latest study is actually from the summer, and only 22% of organizations say themselves they are actively using artificial intelligence. And I think one of the main goals that we have to do is to drive this adoption to probably 100%, right? And this is my hope with kind of like this idea of AI literacy, that this will really help to drive adoption within organizations. So how do you see this?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And because I was speaking so negatively about some AI literacy trainings or certificates, I want to clarify that what you presented is exactly, I think, the right approach. So seeing AI literacy, Article 4, as a kind of starting point. What I don't like is some organizations, some companies that are selling certifications, saying, with that, you are compliant with Article 4 and presenting a kind of fixed list of points you need to fulfill or you need to do. Why do I not like that? Because first of all, again, similar issue with all the AI Act, no one has a clear idea how full-fledged AI literacy in accordance with the AI Act looks like. Actually, the Commission will, and they said it, I think, 2 weeks ago or something, they will do a guideline on that point. And until this guideline are out, again, everyone is unclear. A Big Four accounting firm doesn't really know, a law firm doesn't really know, and a startup doesn't really know. So in the end, I would say it's a little bit waste of money if you are trying to buy, like before, those GDPR compliance certificates that are just pretending to know better than even the Commission or the Parliament knows right now. What you were indicating is, however, exactly the right approach. You need to use this article to build up a kind of company culture of using AI in a trustworthy way, in an informed way, where those, let's say, workers or employees that are in particular coming in touch with this technology or the set of technologies are properly trained, are knowing which risks are being posed by using or by developing it, how to mitigate certain negative scenarios, how to also test a little bit in order to improve it, maybe also how to cooperate with other companies, how to learn from other companies, and so on. So indeed, it's all about I also know this Bitkom numbers. I think 2 years ago, the number was even only at 10 or 8% of use of AI technologies among German companies. Indeed, it's all about increasing this number. And even in a startup or in a small SME that is not really doing a lot in the digital field, of course, they don't need to become experts in deep learning or in foundation models, but in certain things, for example, if they are using ChatGPT for certain products or Copilot or whatsoever, at least there they should have a kind of basic training. No? And therefore, I think what is really good if every company, if each company is kind of checking, maybe also with external advisors, what makes sense for them, and then building an internal comprehensive AI policy. And honestly, this is always an important point that I want to make. I think by doing that, you are also rather safe when it comes to the enforcement of the AI Act, because again, the enforcement bodies in Germany, the Bundesnetzagentur, they cannot expect every company to be 100% compliant and so on and so on. And also them, they often don't really know what is the best data governance, what is the best way to create a representative data set and so on. But by having this internal culture of trustworthy AI technology, you are showing as a company, again, to the best extent of your knowledge, of your expertise, and so on, you are really trying. You have integrated a lot of procedures to safeguard, to promote, blah, 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 blah. And then, honestly, I don't see that you should be afraid very much of sanctions. I think enforcers will really sanctionize those companies that are ignoring that the AI Act is there, or
Yeah.
even intentionally going against certain prohibitions or obligations, no matter what.
So what you're saying then is probably at the end, what you have to do is kind of like, at least as there is no clear guidance now, what you can do. And I think this is what a lot, I mean, we spoke also with lawyers about AI literacy and stuff. And they said like, what we can do is kind of like, we can use maybe things as GDPR as maybe a little bit of reference, but at least at the end of the day, like if everything goes down and if we're getting kind of like, if you would get sued against AI literacy and then it ends in front of not a lawyer, but in front of court, then you have to show that you acted in your best intentions, that what you tried to do was kind of like to have AI literacy, kind of like you have to show like, hey, we had, as you said, we have kind of like a guidance, how people use it. You see, we invited people who spoke about AI. We tried to train the people, and maybe if we're building something, we did some specific trainings and so on. So can we talk a little bit about how you think is the best way to approach, or kind of like to build? You talk a little bit about this, but to kind of like enforce this or make sure that you are ready before not having to wait until the guidelines are actually coming out.
Yeah. Maybe just one addition to what I said just before. I actually think that, again, this article is not connected to any fine. So authorities cannot fine you if you don't do AI literacy training. But authorities have a lot of room to maneuver. And authorities also, let's say, you as a company violated Article 9 on risk management. You missed something. You didn't investigate if certain, let's say, kids were were negatively affected by the AI technology. Um, Authorities will also look at the broader picture. What did the company do, and so on. If they see you have an AI literacy program or mechanism installed in your company, again, best efforts, I think they will even not sanctionize you, even though there was a violation, because yeah, again, best effort, best extent, or at least your penalty will be heavily reduced. So at the beginning, I said a lot about don't take this article too serious, but yeah, it's true. But on the other hand, this article will be definitely taken into account when authorities are thinking about how to sanctionize, how to penalize a company, or how to interact with this company. Now, to your new question, what can companies do until the guidelines are out? Also with the guidelines, probably there will be still open questions. So again, there will not be the best way to provide AI literacy among your workers, employees, and so on and so on. But I guess a very good starting point is let's just stick to a German example. In Germany, one of the earliest companies that did something similar was actually Rewe, the retailer, someone that you would not expect when it comes to AI. But Rewe is actually doing a lot, and they have, similar to IBM and Microsoft, I think now for 2 or 3 years, a kind of list of AI principles, ethical principles, and so on, saying that the whole company is sticking to this principle, that all different services or products are kind of in line with this principle. And of course, this is kind of streamlining all your activities, all your processes, is probably involving an internal, let's call it compliance or governance team that is checking, that is explaining also, for example, now a product team, how to include something like transparency or human oversight in their particular products that they are developing, and so on. So it's becoming really a kind of culture. If I'm not mistaken, I think Rewe has this list also publicly available on their website, or at least they sent around this kind of overview. We as policymakers saw it back then. And again, I think this is a really smart way, because you are giving clear guidance to your whole company. And then based on those more general rules, of course, you need to go really into detail. So looking in data governance. Again, first point is probably check, first of all, what type of AI technologies I'm actually using. I think many companies will be surprised how much AI they are actually using already. What I heard, that many companies are currently preparing Excel tables where they are putting down all potential AI technologies. And then you need to go through with the risk-based approach, what is in the end prohibited, hopefully nothing, what is falling under the high risk category, what there is particular risky, are you doing a lot with personal data, then probably Article 10 is highly relevant. If it's an AI system which has a huge impact on safety, probably human oversight, Article 14 is highly relevant. So you really need to find particular regulatory needs for your specific use case. And of course, you also need to think about which kind of actor you are. Are you a provider that is commercializing a product more in a B2B relationship? Are you a deployer, a user that is just using AI? Then the obligations are heavily reduced for you, and so on and so on. And this means that, after making those more general principles, it's really a very, very lengthy process of figuring out in which way the AI Act is applicable or is important to me. And by doing this process with, let's say with some time and by involving also different parts of your company, I think something like AI literacy is kind of created by itself. By going through this process, you are becoming or you are building AI literacy, and probably most companies will actually need some external help, like from you, to at least at some points of this journey to get advice. Or you are going to things like applied AI, Unternehmertum, trade associations, to also learn from other companies that have the same journey to fulfill.
Yeah, I mean, this great input. And by the way, we already have some questions, but we're gonna leave them more towards the end, maybe for the last 15 minutes, where we answer some of the questions. Just want to talk a little bit more about kind of like what you said, kind of like through kind of like the process you will learn AI literacy. So could it be in theory that you could teach AI literacy yourself, or you could kind of like claim, hey, because we are active. So I had the instance where I was speaking with a startup that is actually building AI, and they said because we are working so closely on kind of like the latest trends, we are not sure if we even need to kind of like have external AI literacy training, because we train ourselves all the time on the job. Is this something that you would see would be enough, that at the end of the day you can say, okay, well, we have been training ourselves and we are working actively on the latest models, and because of that we know this? Or would you expect, okay, hey, I would love to see them also showing that they have a better understanding for like something like ISO standards for 7001, or have some kind of like understanding of regulation? And is this then kind of like, would this be then at some point enough to self-certify, or would you then advise them that it makes sense to work with external parties? For instance, TÜV provides kind of like these TÜV trainings on ISO certifications on how to become an AI auditor or something. Would you like to see something like this in these organizations that are building on, it's very active in the field of AI?
Yeah, maybe on the last point, as you heard in my previous statements, I'm not a big fan of non-standardized certificates and so on and so on. If in the future there is an ISO standard or a DIN norm for AI literacy according to the AI Act, that then indeed you can get via performing a training at TÜV Süd or whatsoever, probably this is wise and a good outcome, because even though it would create costs, at least it's not show, and there are not huge differences between different certificates and so on, because it's standardized. But yeah, right now I would say there is this kind of Wild West, and therefore, yeah, it's difficult to, so Wild West between, let's say, offers or certification offers and so on, and external help. It depends probably very much on the company, what is needed to really address the examples that you were mentioning. And you kind of indicated already what I also believe is true. Even a company, a startup that is expert on foundation models, machine learning, they probably know much more than I, because I'm an AI policy expert, but I understand a little bit how the technology works, but that's it. But if they don't have someone like you and me, they will not understand why the AI Act is written in a certain way that probably doesn't make any sense for a technology person. So even an AI startup, at least at certain stages of their journey towards AI literacy, towards AI compliance, they will need some help. If it's now a third-party consultant, a law firm, or if it's a company network, a trade association, whatsoever, everyone should choose what he or she prefers. But without help, I honestly, big tech would have, so US tech companies like Google and so on, they definitely would have enough experts from different areas to do it themselves. But to my knowledge, not even those companies are doing it completely themselves. Also, they are doing cooperations with external trainers and so on. And I think, again, an external trainer only for literacy is probably useless. But if an external trainer is giving you company on your journey towards compliance, towards literacy, this is probably something that is very, very useful. Because also the reference to standards, we were not talking to harmonize standards on literacy. Harmonized standards on the AI Act will become applicable. We talked also about it. There will be guidelines on the AI Act. There will be a lot of activities in the field of AI governance that you as a deep learning developer will very likely never hear about. So you need to meet at least sometimes people that are active in the AI governance field in order to know, now the law is being complemented by an additional guideline that, for example, is being released on the 2nd February next year. And in this guideline, there are those and those additional points.
Yeah. I mean, what we always said, and what I think is kind of like, what is the best way how to prepare for kind of like this AI literacy in the company is kind of like think about what are different roles you have within the company. And we always said like what I believe what we're going to see very much to. I mean, I used to work in banks, and then we had once a year this standardized GDPR training or KYC, which was roughly like 30 minutes and kind of like an online thing. And I guess this is something we might also see in the future, that maybe once a year there's kind of like a very basic AI literacy training so people know where to go. And then I said the next level, try to identify in your organization departments where they would profit a lot from kind of like specialized training, for instance, AI and marketing, because there is a real economic potential behind it, knowing how to use kind of like image generation tools to be much faster. So think about these. And then we said, okay, well, what is also very helpful for those people in the organization whose role is to strategically advance AI, to have more management training, support them in kind of like the strategic advancement, very much of the idea what we talked about, seeing AI literacy as a chance and not as a challenge to implement this. And then also identifying those more technical people who build AI, and then giving them more the support on, well, what trainings do I need in order to build audit-ready code or compliant-ready code? So once we build those things, they like it's easier for everyone, and we can kind of like do it in accordance with the AI Act. So this is what kind of like the advice. Would you agree that this is probably a good way forward for organizations how to navigate this?
No, totally. And I think you made this reference yourself at the very beginning of our talk to GDPR and to best practices there. So I truly believe, and we see some organizations already mixing GDPR compliance with AI compliance or AI governance and so on. Which makes sense, I think, for companies, for those organizations and so on, because there will be in the future, similar to the data protection ecosystem, an AI governance ecosystem that will keep itself busy with, as I said already, new approaches, new technologies, new rules, and so on and so on. And however, it will not be completely different to the data protection community. Also, because of the AI Act's origin in the product safety legislation, there will be also overlaps or certain practices that are working in normal product safety that are now also working for the AI Act. In the medical field, there are certain risk management systems already in place, an ISO standard there is for the quality management system and so on. All those things are actually very helpful for companies that are struggling right now. But indeed, as you flagged out, it's all about identifying those mechanism or those approaches, and actually also identifying people that have knowledge about those approaches and combining them now with the AI people, basically. So it's really all about connections and building up a community. And again, maybe also not creating a community in a silo, but this time hopefully connecting this community with other communities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Great insight. So what I want to do now, we have two questions. I mean, I think we touched already a bit of the questions, but I still want to kind of like take them. So one from Zoe, and she asked, could consumers file civil liability claims based on lack of AI literacy, even before institutions are in place to ensure ensure to enforcement of such obligations? I think you mentioned already this is probably not the case, right?
Yeah, there is one thing where people need to make a difference, and I don't know if the person who is asking this question is making this difference, because she used the term civil liability, which is correct, because the AI Act is only creating the possibility for national competent authorities to issue fines. So if a provider, for example, is building an AI system, again, with a data set that is biased, not representative, blah, 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 this company could face a fine. This fine, of course, would need to be paid in Germany to the Bundesnetzagentur, and the money is going in the pocket of the state. If now, let's say, 1 million users or end users are violated in their fundamental rights, and there are certain damages, or in other use cases, certain harms that are occurring, this is something that is not covered at all by the AI Act. And now it becomes interesting. At the moment, as many of you maybe know, there is a situation that the product liability directive also entered now into force, and we have national liability frameworks. So far, it's a bit unclear, in particular the case that I just made when it comes to immaterial harms, so things like violations of fundamental rights and so on and so on. Those violations are probably not covered at all, at least in most member states, and in particular not via the product liability directive. So in this case, there would not be any civil liability. If you are harmed by let's say, a defect of AI system in your, let's say, on your health, then there would be definitely some civil liability claims, and you as harmed person could get redress. And now what the parliament is currently doing is, in particular us, because the Commission and the Council are a bit unsure, we are checking if the AI liability directive, another of these many AI laws that the European Union was proposing, which is still on the table, is still not really discussed, if this law is needed to fill those gaps that I have just identified. And maybe if we are saying yes, and the Commission and the Council in the end also, maybe this then would be the way, as the person asking the question was indicating, to get civil liability if there is something going wrong and creating harm or damage.
Yeah, I mean, she actually is specializing her question. So she says, for example, if an employer knew or should have known that employees were using AI and that resulted in harm to a consumer due to insufficient knowledge. So I think she's talking also a little bit about kind of like this, what we call shadow AI, and it's associated with, could this form the basis of a claim?
Right now, I don't think so. With the new AI liability directive, maybe yes. So it's super unclear how we are in which direction we are going, but you could say that if you are then violating certain parts of the AI Act, maybe also Article 4, maybe other high-risk obligations or other obligations, then by this violation, there would be either a strict liability claim or a fault-based liability claim with the presumption that is helping the harmed person or whatsoever. But yeah, here I cannot really speak in which direction it could be in the future be possible. To my knowledge, I'm not the biggest PLD, product liability expert so far. It's not possible on a European level, and at least in Germany, I think it's also not covered by the law, this case. But even there, I'm already unsure. So yeah, we need to see.
Okay, great. So I have a next question. So from Erica. So
Yeah.
do you know why there's such an early enforcement date, but such limited resources around AI literacy? I mean, this is something you
Yeah.
mentioned at the beginning,
Yes.
but you can say this again. And I think actually this is something super interesting that we often fail to see, because we now sort of have kind of like the Ready AI Act. I think there's so much knowledge and know-how into how the AI Act was created, what articles have been shifting around, what kind
Yeah.
of like did people, because I see there were also kind of like a lot of secondary documents where people put a lot of thought into some of the things, which
Yeah.
which now are often completely missed, where there's a lot of interesting know-how that you don't see because you just see the final act and not how it has been created, right?
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. So what I can just say, again, I was at every technical meeting, or I think at least, or most of the technical meetings, and I was also heavily involved in at least some parts of the drafting and so on and so on. To my knowledge, it was never being discussed when Article 4 should become applicable. The tendency was to see it as one of those articles that should kick in on the 2nd August of 26. And as I said, and as Tristan now also was indicating, there was this shuffling, articles were removed, were added in again or included in again, and so on. And suddenly at the end, a few days before the vote, the final vote was there, Article 4 was suddenly Article 4. And and basically kicking in so early, because I think most people were just thinking about the definition, were thinking about Article 5, where indeed the political agreement was the prohibitions cannot kick in 2 years, because it doesn't make sense to allow certain things for 2 years and then prohibit them after a grace period. And I think Article 4 was kind of overlooked in this exercise because of the speed of the negotiation, the time pressure, and so on. And unfortunately, those issues, as I indicated already, we are seeing a lot happening right now in the European Union, because many of our legislative procedures are, or at least in the last term, are organized in such a chaotic way. However, now that this article is there, and based on what Tristan and I were talking about, I would say it actually now makes sense if we are really thinking about this kind of journey. So even already now on the 2nd February, where only prohibitions are kicking in, are becoming applicable, companies should think about AI literacy. They should already have started their journey towards becoming AI Act compliant. They should, for example, already have checked if some of their technologies that they are using would qualify as a prohibited AI system. And for such an assessment, even if you're outsourcing it, you actually need some level of AI literacy. So even though it was an accident, in my opinion, which puts this article there, nowadays I would say it actually makes sense. But again, it's good that this article is not connected with a fine, because to uh, to force companies to have already now fully fledged AI literacy is super unrealistic, as the person was also mentioning in the question.
Yeah. So next question from Chiara. So it's certainly true that a personalized training from external experts is the best, but I see it as impractical in the real world. I think companies will search for AI literacy certificates, especially because of what Zoe said, the lack of literacy might be a ground for seeking damages. In your opinion, what could the requirements for a certification regarding AI literacy be?
Luckily, the Commission and national competent authorities need to decide on this point. Again, if, like Tristan and I said, there is not an ISO standard or a DIN standard that is saying this you need to fulfill in order to become an expert, an external expert, we will unfortunately very likely see a Wild West, like with the GDPR certificates flying around, which are super different and where you are not really knowing what you are buying. And in the end, it really doesn't say, at least in some cases, that you are really GDPR compliant, so you're just buying the compliance. As I think that the Commission and the national regulators want probably to avoid such a situation, I truly believe that there will be some movement. So either there will be a technical standard, or at least there will be some kind of guidelines. And I mentioned that the Commission will work on it. Maybe we will see another code of practice or code of conduct in this direction, or some kind of template, because again, everyone feels that there need to be some kind of harmonization. But of course, what is true is that right now, the number of experts is rather slim, which again is so important to take into account, that no one can perform perfectly right now. So it's maybe something that we can partially aim for when the whole AI Act is becoming applicable in mid 26. But even then, there will be a lack of talent around. There will be lack of use cases, lack of a lot of things, and maybe we have already updated certain parts of the AI Act. So again, the whole AI Act probably will be an ongoing effort to of the whole community to adjust constantly, to be up for the task, and so on, which in the end always leads to the same assessment, that by showing that you are committed, by showing that you are willing to go on this journey, that you are willing to invest at least a little bit internally, you should be fine when it comes to sanctions and so on. And yes, indeed, maybe the last point, the easy way out is to go for a certificate, but by externalizing everything, I would say you have this risk that you are lacking internal knowledge. And well, if a certificate is not good, maybe even it will not give you the legal certainty. Maybe an national competent authority would in the end even argue, well, it was known that this certificate is not really good. There were several scandals combined to companies that were also certified by this party, and therefore, you wasted basically your money. So even then, I as a company, I would, even as a small company, I would always try to at least build up some kind of small compliance team, of small internal procedures, governance mechanism, and so on. I know that this is super difficult. I know that this will especially overwhelm startups and SMEs. This is definitely the fault of the regulator. We should have maybe thought about longer transition periods, about other things. The only positive point that I can mention here, that hopefully at least the digital innovation hubs and the regulatory sandboxes are helping a little bit by creating a kind of public-private partnership model, where the regulators or the authorities are engaging with the private sectors, are building up best practices, are kind of pretending as a service provider a little bit in helping companies to become compliant, so that especially those that do not have money do not always need to go to commercial actors, but maybe can go to the Bundesnetzagentur in Germany in order to solve the most urgent questions.
Yeah. So I want to be very mindful of your time. I mean, it has been an amazing discussion. There would be a lot of more questions, but I know you're very, very busy, and I'm very thankful for you being here. Maybe one very short question: do you know these guidelines when you talked about on AI literacy? When can we expect them?
I'm honestly, I a bit forgot it if it was the end of 25 or only in 26. But if I would at the moment bet, I just talked yesterday about it, but I have so many dates at the moment in my head. I'm not 100% sure, but if I would need to bet now, I think it was end of 25.
Okay, then we will have more. Then we will see more kind of like how this is, and I think the big thing that I realize about the AI is a lot learning by doing for everyone.
Exactly.
Like not only
Exactly.
for the people that have to kind of like play the rules according to AI, but
Exactly.
also for the people that are making the AI act.
Exactly. Yeah, no, true. And I hope, especially since we are both Germans, I really hope that in particular our country is in this case learning a little bit from the US Americans, because they are doing that. No, they are trying out, they are giving second chances and so on and so on. And in particular, if you look in Germany to GDPR compliance, so many companies are being scared, are not investing in things, are focusing on legal uncertainties and so on. And indeed, in the private sector, but also in the public sector, we actually need the opposite. We need the kind of atmosphere or spirit of learning by doing,
Yeah.
which would mean, of course, that then not, I don't know, the Italian Data Protection Authority is now starting to fine the whole continent, while other while other countries within the European Union are trying to do the opposite. So it would, especially on the public side, it would really need to have a common understanding that all regulators, all authorities have the same mindset and are saying we are all in the same boat. We all lack a clear understanding how to do it. So let's work together in a positive way and in an open-minded way where smaller mistakes, non-intentional mistakes, are actually allowed and part of a
Yeah.
longer journey.
And not always speak about punishment, but actually kind
Exactly.
of like how you can encourage them. And there's, I
Exactly.
mean, as we said at the beginning, I think there's also a lot of good things and good intentions, and we should focus much more rather than speaking about punishments. So Kai,
Exactly.
thank you so much for your time. It was incredibly insightful. It was amazing to have someone who actually has been from the beginning involved in writing those things, and also kind of like picking your brain and what you think about it. So thank you so much. Have a good time. And if you like what you're doing, you as listeners, leave a like, follow Kai, follow us as the AI Strategy Institute. And if you're interested in more, just let us know and then write us a message. So thank you so much. Take care. Bye.